The TV turned on and showed a live feed of her apartment. There was no click, no soft whine of waking electronics, no shift in the air that warned of change. One moment the living room was dim and ordinary, the only light a thin amber stripe from the street lamp filtering through the blinds, and the next, a cold blue glow bloomed against the far wall. I was alone. The apartment was small enough that loneliness felt measurable, like square footage. Couch against one wall, low coffee table scarred by old heat rings, a narrow kitchenette with a humming refrigerator, a short hallway that led to the bathroom and bedroom. Everything within 10 steps of everything else. The TV hadn't been on all day. The remote sat upside down on the table, its batteries unreliable. I hadn't touched it, but the screen was awake now, and it was showing my living room. Not a channel, not static, a live feed. I saw the back of my own head, slightly bowed as I sat on the floor leaning against the couch. I saw my shoulders rise and fall with breath. I saw the lamplight casting a warm cone over the carpet. The image was crisp, high angle, centered, as if a camera had been mounted directly above me in the ceiling. I didn't move at first. I let the stillness stretch. The refrigerator hummed. Pipes clicked faintly in the walls. Somewhere upstairs, someone crossed their floor, the sound soft and padded. Then, carefully, I turned my head. On the screen, the woman turned her head too, a fraction late. It was subtle, so subtle it could have been my imagination, but there was a delay. The feed lagged behind my motion by the smallest breath. I looked up at the ceiling. White paint, hairline crack near the smoke detector. No camera, no dark lens. On the screen, I watched myself look up, the top of my head exposed to that impossible vantage point. My heart began to beat harder, each pulse deliberate. Okay, I whispered, to the room, to the light, to whatever might be listening. I pushed myself to my feet. On screen, I rose as well. The overhead angle followed perfectly, adjusting focus as I straightened. The perspective was wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. It wasn't just high, it was comprehensive. The entire room was visible in neat geometry. Couch, table, kitchenette, hallway entrance. Even angles that shouldn't have been visible were visible. I took a step to the right. The woman on the TV took a step to the right. But again, she was slower. Half a second slower. That meant it was a feed. A real-time capture. It had to be. I moved toward the television. The glow intensified, bleaching color from the room. My shadow stretched long across the floor, darker and more defined than it appeared in the feed. I waved one hand experimentally. On the screen, she raised her hand. A beat after me. Relief flickered through me. It was reacting. That meant it was recording. I waved both arms. She followed. I leaned close to the screen, studying details. The coffee mug on the table. The stack of unopened mail. The small tear in the couch cushion seam. Everything was there. Everything, except the top shelf of the bookshelf. In reality, it held only books. Their spines faded unevenly. On the screen, between two novels, sat something dark and narrow, like a figurine, or a thin standing shape. I froze. The object was almost human in outline but blurred, as if slightly out of focus. It appeared to be facing downward, toward me. Slowly, I turned to look at the actual bookshelf. Empty, just books. When I turned back to the TV, the object was gone. My mouth had gone dry. The hum of the refrigerator felt louder now, like static beneath everything. I could hear the faint buzz of the TV itself, an electrical presence that seemed too physical. I decided to test it. I reached for the lamp beside the couch, fingers closing around the metal switch. On the screen, the lamp went dark. My breath caught. In the real room, the lamp was still on. I stared at the TV, at the darker version of my apartment illuminated only by blue light. Then I flipped the switch. The room plunged into that same blue darkness. The feed had changed first. I stepped backward, pulse hammering. No, I whispered. I moved toward the hallway. On screen, I moved too. But this time there was no lag. We were synchronized. Perfectly. I stopped abruptly. She stopped at the same instant. The overhead view had subtly shifted. The angle wasn't centered anymore. It had tilted just enough to see further down the hallway than should have been possible from that vantage point. In my real apartment, the hallway ended after a few steps at the bathroom door. On the screen, the hallway looked deeper, longer. The walls seemed to stretch back into dimness that didn't exist in reality. I stared at my actual hallway. It was short, predictable. I could walk it blind. I took one cautious step toward it. On screen, I was already closer. I hadn't moved yet. The image showed me standing at the hallway entrance, closer than I was in reality. My body angled slightly toward the dark interior. A ripple passed through me, cold and electric. The feed was ahead. I stepped forward quickly, trying to catch up. The woman on the screen had already stepped into the hallway. No, I breathed. I was still in the living room. I hadn't crossed the threshold. But on screen, I had. She stood halfway down the elongated corridor, her figure small against walls that seemed to taper inward. The geometry was wrong. The space didn't belong inside my apartment. I forced myself to wave again, jerky and deliberate. On screen, she did not wave. Instead, she lowered her arms slowly to her side, as if responding to something I couldn't see. My pulse roared in my ears. The feed wasn't mirroring me anymore. It was diverging. I rushed to the TV and grabbed the remote, pressing the power button repeatedly. Nothing changed. No menu. No flicker. On screen, the version of me in the hallway turned her head slightly, as though listening to something just out of frame. Then I saw it. At the very end of the stretched hallway, far beyond where my bathroom should have been, there was a door that didn't exist. It was closed. The woman on the screen began walking toward it. I hadn't moved. I was still in the living room, standing inches from the television. She reached the door and stopped. The overhead camera angle shifted again, impossibly smooth, descending slightly so I could see more of the door's surface. It was painted the same color as my walls. But it had no handle. The woman on screen raised her hand. In my body, my arm twitched upward involuntarily, as if pulled by a thread. I clenched my fists to keep them down. Her fingers touched the door, and the image flickered. For a split second, the feed changed. The living room reappeared, but altered. The couch was farther from the wall. The crack in the ceiling had spread like branching veins. The bookshelf was empty. The hallway was gone. In its place was a wide, open passage leading into something vast and unlit. Then the image snapped back. I was still standing in my real living room. On screen, I was still in the hallway, hand against the door. Slowly, she turned her head, not toward the door, toward the camera, toward the impossible vantage point above her. Her face tilted upward, and she smiled. It wasn't my smile. It was too calm, too knowing. The door behind her began to bow inward, as if something on the other side was leaning against it. The TV's blue light intensified, washing the room in a sterile glow. The hum deepened into something almost like breath. I realized then that the angle of the camera wasn't from the ceiling. It wasn't from any physical place inside my apartment. It was from the shape of the apartment itself. From the way the walls met, from the corners, from the hollow spaces inside drywall and beneath floorboards, from every place that held darkness and waited. The feed wasn't documenting my home. It was documenting a version of it. A version that extended, that adjusted, that made room. On screen, the door split down the middle without sound. Blackness spilled through. The woman, my outline, my hair, my body, stepped forward into it. The image cut abruptly. The TV now showed my living room again. Empty. The couch, the table, the lamp glowing softly. Nomi. I turned slowly to look behind me. The hallway was short, ordinary, harmless, but the air felt thicker, weighted. I looked back at the screen. In the corner of the overhead feed, barely visible near the ceiling crack, there was a dark indentation in the plaster, like the start of something pressing outward. And beneath it, in the living room that wasn't quite mine, the couch had shifted a few inches closer to the hallway. as if preparing for something. The TV remained on, watching, waiting to show me the next version. The bathroom mirror fogged up with a message she didn't write. It happened in the soft aftermath of heat. I had just turned off the shower. The pipes gave a final, hollow shudder in the walls, and the water tapered from a steady rush to a reluctant drip. Steam hung thick in the bathroom, warm and fragrant with the faint scent of eucalyptus body wash. The air pressed gently against my skin, damp and intimate, like breath held too close. I stepped out onto the bath mat, its fabric plush and thirsty beneath my feet. The room was small, narrow sink, medicine cabinet with a mirrored front, toilet tucked beside the tub. The fan above hummed lazily, failing to clear the haze. That was when I noticed the writing. At first, it was only negative space in the condensation, a pattern interrupting the uniform fog. Thin lines where steam refused to cling. I leaned closer, squinting through the moisture-beaded air. Letters. 3 of them. Wait. I stared at the mirror, water still threading down my spine. I hadn't written that. The thought arrived calmly, almost politely. Maybe it was leftover. Something traced absent-mindedly after a previous shower. But I lived alone. I had for 2 years. No one else used this bathroom. I reached up and pressed my fingertip to the glass. It was warm beneath the condensation, almost body temperature. The letters were slightly clearer where the surrounding fog had thickened. The strokes were deliberate. Straight lines, careful angles. Not my handwriting. I laughed once under my breath. Thin. Unconvincing. Very funny. I murmured to no one. Steam drifted lazily upward, curling near the ceiling like pale smoke. The drip from the showerhead landed in the tub with a steady, metronomic tick. Outside the bathroom, the apartment was quiet, refrigerator humming, distant traffic whispering along the road below. I wiped the mirror with the flat of my hand. The words smeared, vanishing into streaks. My palm left a broad, clear arc in the fog. I wiped again, clearing the rest of the glass until my own reflection stared back at me. Hair damp and clinging to my neck, skin flushed from heat, eyes slightly too bright. There, I said softly. The fan continued its low whir. The steam thinned gradually. I brushed my teeth, washed my face. The routine movements steadied me. By the time I finished, the mirror had nearly cleared on its own, the last traces of fog retreating to the corners like defeated ghosts. I turned off the bathroom light and left the door ajar. It must have been 20 minutes later. I was in bed, the apartment wrapped in the comfortable hush of nearing midnight. My bedside lamp cast a small amber pool across the quilt. I had just set my book aside when I heard it. Faint, wet sound, like a finger dragged slowly across glass. I held still. The sound came again. Soft, intentional. I told myself it was cooling pipes, contracting metal. Old buildings made noises at night. But the bathroom fan was off now. The air had cooled. I slid out of bed and padded down the short hallway. The carpet felt cooler than before, the fibers brushing against my bare feet. The bathroom light was still off. I pushed the door open. The mirror was fogged again. Completely. The air inside the room was cool, noticeably cooler than my bedroom. The tile floor bit gently at my soles. There was no steam lingering, no humidity clinging to my skin. Yet the mirror bloomed with condensation, thick and pearled. And in its center, don't. The word was larger this time, the letters more confident. My pulse thudded in my throat. No, I whispered, stepping inside. That's not. Condensation didn't form without heat. I hadn't showered again. The tap was off. The pipes were quiet. I reached out, hesitant now, and touched the glass. Cold. The surface was unmistakably cold. The fog felt wrong under my fingers. Slick but dense, like breath exhaled from something close. My mind raced for explanations. Residual moisture in the walls. A trick of temperature. Perhaps I hadn't fully wiped the mirror earlier and the letters were simply reappearing as the glass cooled unevenly. Yes, that had to be it. I wiped the mirror again, slower this time, erasing the word in careful strokes. The glass cleared. My reflection looked strained now, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. Behind me, the doorway yawned dark. I stood there longer than necessary, waiting. Nothing happened. Eventually, I exhaled and turned away. As I reached the doorframe, a chill swept over my back. Not from the air, but from something else. A sense of being aligned, positioned. I turned slowly. The mirror was fogging again. This time I watched it happen. A pale bloom spreading from the center outward, like frost creeping across a window pane. The room temperature did not change. The air did not thicken. Only the glass transformed. Letters carved themselves into the forming mist, not appearing all at once but forming stroke by stroke. I watched the first vertical line draw itself downward. Then the next. My stomach twisted. The word was backward. NRUT. Took me a second to understand. Turn. I didn't. I stood rooted to the tile, watching the reversed word hover in the condensation. Slowly, my reflection began to change. Not dramatically, not grotesquely, just slightly. The angle of my shoulders shifted a fraction. My head tilted a degree further than I felt it move. I swallowed. In the mirror, my lips curved faintly upward. I wasn't smiling. My hands trembled as I reached forward and wiped the glass again, more forcefully this time. The fog streaked and vanished under my palm. I'm tired, I said to the empty room. That's all. I kept my eyes locked on my reflection. Behind me, in the reflected doorway, the hallway seemed darker than it should have been. The light above me flickered once. When it steadied, the mirror had fogged over entirely. I hadn't felt it happen. And in large, unmistakable letters, I can see you. The handwriting was clearer now, deeper. The strokes etched sharply into the condensation as though carved with pressure. A drop of water slid down from the top edge of the mirror, cutting through the first word like a tear. You can't, I whispered. My voice sounded small in the tiled room. The dripping in the tub resumed, though I was certain the faucet was off. Drip, drip, drip. Each drop seemed synchronized with the formation of a new line beneath the first. You don't say it out loud. My throat tightened. I hadn't told anyone. About the insomnia, the panic that bloomed sometimes in the dark, the thoughts that circled without landing. I stepped back. In the reflection, I did not. She stood firm, close to the mirror, her smile faint but unmistakable. I raised my hand slowly. My reflection's hand remained at her side. The air in the bathroom felt suddenly dense, pressing against my chest. That's not me, I said, though I was speaking to the glass. Her lips parted. The fog shifted, gathering at the center. One final line formed, smaller than the rest. You asked to be seen. A memory flickered. Late nights standing at the sink, staring at myself, whispering into the quiet that I felt invisible, that I wished something would notice. The mirror wasn't reflecting me anymore. It was responding. It knew the things I had only ever thought in silence. The confessions breathed into steam and rinsed down the drain. The woman in the mirror leaned closer, though I had not moved. Her eyes were brighter, sharper. The fog began to clear, not from my touch, but from within. The words faded, leaving only her face. And slowly, deliberately, she lifted her hand. Behind me, in the real bathroom, something shifted just slightly, like weight settling on tile. I didn't turn around, because I understood, finally, that the mirror wasn't showing what stood in front of it. It was showing what stood behind.